July 15, 1944. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, commanding the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment defending against the American breakout from the beachhead, reviewed intelligence reports from his reconnaissance units. Among the routine observations of American troop movements and supply convoys, one report seemed so absurd he initially dismissed it as reconnaissance error. "Sir," his intelligence officer, Hauptmann Klaus Weber, reported with visible confusion, "Forward observers report American supply vehicles operating behind their lines that appear to be refrigeration trucks, mobile ice cream manufacturing facilities." Von der Heydte looked up from the tactical maps. "Say that again." "Ice cream trucks, sir. Refrigerated vehicles with manufacturing equipment. The Americans are producing ice cream at the front lines and distributing it to their troops." Von der Heydte stood in silence for a long moment, processing information that seemed to violate every principle of military logistics he understood. The German army was rationing ammunition. Artillery units were limited to specific daily shell allocations. Infantry divisions were receiving reduced food rations as supply lines from Germany stretched thin. Fuel was so scarce that armored units had to carefully calculate every kilometer of movement, and the Americans were bringing ice cream trucks to the front. "This must be propaganda," von der Heydte finally stated, "or a misidentification. No military would waste logistics capacity on frozen desserts during active combat operations." But the report was accurate, and it represented something far more devastating to German morale than any weapon the Americans deployed. Visible, undeniable proof that the United States possessed industrial and logistical capacity so overwhelming that they could afford to deliver non-essential luxury items to combat troops while simultaneously sustaining the largest military operation in history. What began as a seemingly absurd observation would become one of the most psychologically damaging revelations of the war for German forces, the realization that they were fighting an enemy so materially superior that American soldiers ate ice cream while German soldiers starved. The U.S. Army's commitment to ice cream had begun long before D-Day. In 1943, the War Department had determined that troop morale was significantly enhanced by access to familiar American foods and luxuries. Ice cream, deeply embedded in American culture as a comfort food, became a priority item for morale maintenance. The reasoning was pragmatic rather than frivolous. American military planners understood that sustained combat effectiveness required more than weapons and ammunition. Soldiers who felt connected to home, who experienced small luxuries that reminded them of civilian life, maintained better psychological resilience and unit cohesion. Ice cream, seemingly trivial, represented a tangible connection to American prosperity and normalcy. By 1944, the U.S. military was operating mobile ice cream plants in every theater of war. These weren't simple refrigeration trucks. They were fully functional manufacturing facilities mounted on vehicle chassis. Each unit could produce 10 gallons of ice cream every 7 minutes. The equipment included refrigeration systems, mixing apparatus, and storage freezers, all powered by generators and capable of operating in field conditions. The scale was staggering. By mid-1944, the U.S. military was producing approximately 1 million gallons of ice cream per month for troops overseas. Special refrigerated cargo holds were installed on transport ships. The Navy constructed a floating ice cream barge for the Pacific Theater, a vessel dedicated entirely to producing and distributing ice cream to fleet units. To German soldiers subsisting on increasingly meager rations, often reduced to 1,500 calories per day by late 1944, compared to the recommended 3,000, the idea that Americans were manufacturing ice cream at the front was almost incomprehensible. Gefreiter Hans Müller, captured near Saint-Lô in late July 1944, experienced his first encounter with American logistics abundance during processing at a temporary POW holding area. An American supply truck arrived distributing rations to guards and prisoners. Among the rations were individual portions of ice cream. Marcel Meller's interrogation report, preserved in U.S. Army archives, recorded his reaction. "I was given ice cream, frozen ice cream, not preserved rations, not emergency supplies, Actual ice cream manufactured recently enough to still be frozen. I asked the guard how this was possible. He laughed and said the Americans make it fresh every day. I did not believe him. Then I saw the truck, a mobile factory producing ice cream 30 kilometers from the front lines. This is when I knew Germany had lost the war, not because of American tanks or planes, but because of ice cream. Any nation with resources so abundant they can manufacture frozen desserts at the front while fighting cannot be defeated by a nation rationing bread. The psychological impact wasn't limited to captured soldiers. German troops observing American positions began reporting details that seemed designed to demoralize. American soldiers ate 3 full meals daily, hot meals prepared in field kitchens. They smoked American cigarettes freely, discarding half-smoked ones. They wore clean uniforms regularly, indicating functional laundry services at the front. And they ate ice cream. Obergefreiter Kurt Schneider, serving with the 352nd Infantry Division, recorded in his diary in August 1944, "We watch the Americans through binoculars. They sit in the sun eating ice cream like they are on holiday at the beach. We have not had meat in 6 days. Our bread ration is half of what it was in May. But the Americans eat ice cream. My platoon leader says this is psychological warfare, that the Americans deliberately display their abundance to demoralize us. If so, it is working." The ice cream trucks were not psychological warfare in any planned sense. They were simply practical implementation of American military doctrine that well-fed, comfortable soldiers fought more effectively than hungry, miserable ones. But the effect on German morale was devastating precisely because it was genuine. The Americans weren't pretending to have abundance. They actually possessed it in such quantities that distributing ice cream to frontline troops was considered routine logistics rather than luxury. By September 1944, as American forces broke out of Normandy and began racing across France, German soldiers were encountering the full scale of American logistical superiority. Captured American supply dumps contained more rations than entire German divisions possessed. Individual American soldiers carried more ammunition than German soldiers received weekly. American field hospitals had medical supplies that German hospitals hadn't seen since 1942, and everywhere there was ice cream. The mobile ice cream plants followed American advances with the same priority as ammunition supply and fuel delivery. When American forces liberated French towns, local civilians were often treated to ice cream distributions, psychological operations that demonstrated American prosperity and generosity simultaneously. Hauptmann Wilhelm Fischer, captured near Metz in November 1944, provided the most detailed German assessment of American logistics philosophy during his interrogation. He had spent 3 days observing American supply operations before capture. The Americans approach logistics differently than we do. We calculate minimum requirements and distribute accordingly. They calculate maximum capacity and distribute abundantly. They have so much of everything that they can afford waste. I watched them discard ration boxes that were damaged in shipping, perfectly good food thrown away because the packaging was dented. I watched them pour out coffee because it had grown cold. I watched them distribute ice cream to troops who complained it wasn't the flavor they preferred. Fischer's observation revealed the fundamental difference in logistics philosophy. German military doctrine, shaped by resource scarcity and blockade conditions in World War I, emphasized efficiency and careful rationing. Every item was accounted for, every calorie calculated, waste minimized. This approach worked when resources were limited but adequate. The American approach assumed unlimited resources. Rather than carefully rationing supplies, they oversupplied deliberately. Rather than calculating minimum requirements, they exceeded maximum desires. The ice cream wasn't a deviation from this philosophy. It was the philosophy expressed in frozen form. The scale of American food logistics dwarfed German capacity by orders of magnitude. A single American infantry division received approximately 650 tons of supplies daily, of which roughly 200 tons was food and related items. This included fresh meat, vegetables, dairy products, and yes, ice cream. The equivalent German division received approximately 150 tons of supplies daily, with food comprising perhaps 50 tons, most of it preserved or dehydrated rations. American soldiers consumed an average of 4,000 to 4,500 calories per day, exceeding the 3,000-calorie recommended minimum and far surpassing what German soldiers received. The additional calories weren't just quantity, they represented quality, fresh foods, variety, recognizable American dishes prepared by trained cooks using modern equipment. By December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, the contrast reached its peak. German forces launching the Ardennes offensive were already on reduced rations before the attack began. Their offensive plan included expectations of capturing American supply dumps to sustain their advance. They were literally planning to eat American food because their own supplies were inadequate. When German troops overran American positions during the initial assault, they discovered supply depots that seemed fantastical. Oberst Otto Skorzeny, commanding special operations units during the Bulge, reported finding American supply caches that included fresh turkeys for Christmas dinner, individual soldiers' packages from home, PX supplies including candy and cigarettes, complete field kitchens with multiple menu options, and refrigerated trailers containing ice cream. Skorzeny's report to headquarters noted, "The Americans have not brought enough ammunition forward for sustained defense, but they have brought ice cream." This tells us something profound about their confidence. They believe they will win, so they plan for comfort rather than desperation. We are fighting for survival. They are fighting while eating dessert. German soldiers who captured American rations would often spend hours simply eating, consuming quantities of food they hadn't seen in months. The psychological impact was severe. It reinforced the growing understanding among German troops that they were fighting an enemy with resources so vast that defeat was inevitable. The mobile ice cream plants themselves became targets of German propaganda attempts. Joseph Goebbels' ministry tried to spin American abundance as decadence, claiming that Americans were weak soldiers who needed luxury to fight, that the ice cream proved Americans lacked warrior spirit, that German austerity demonstrated superior martial virtue. But German soldiers at the front knew better. They understood that an army capable of manufacturing ice cream at the front was an army with resources that couldn't be exhausted. The propaganda about American weakness rang hollow when American soldiers eating ice cream were simultaneously advancing against German positions with overwhelming firepower. By early 1945, as American forces crossed into Germany proper, the ice cream trucks followed. German civilians who had been told by propaganda that America was starving, that the British blockade had succeeded, that enemy forces were on the verge of collapse, witnessed American soldiers distributing ice cream to German children from mobile manufacturing trucks. The cognitive dissonance was severe. How could a nation supposedly defeated by U-boats be producing ice cream in Germany? How could forces that propaganda claimed were exhausted be handing out luxury items to enemy civilians? The ice cream became proof that everything German propaganda had claimed about American weakness was false. Frau Margarete Weber, a housewife in Aachen when it fell to American forces in October 1944, recorded in her diary, "The Americans arrived with tanks and trucks beyond counting. Then came trucks distributing food. Then came a truck making ice cream. Ice cream. We have not had butter in a year. We have not had meat in months. Our children are thin from hunger, and the Americans make ice cream in our streets and give it to our children. My son ate ice cream today for the first time in his life. He is 6 years old. The Americans who gave it to him killed his father at Normandy. I do not understand this war anymore." The juxtaposition was deliberate American policy, demonstrating both overwhelming military power and abundant material prosperity simultaneously. German civilians were meant to understand that resistance was futile, not just militarily, but materially. The Americans could afford to feed German children ice cream while simultaneously destroying German military forces. This was power beyond military strength. It was civilizational superiority expressed through logistics. The U.S. Navy's ice cream operations in the Pacific Theater were even more elaborate. The USS Comfort, a hospital ship, had a 2,000-gallon-per-day ice cream plant, specifically for wounded soldiers. Aircraft carriers and battleships installed ice cream manufacturing facilities as routine equipment. The Navy's IceCream barge in the Western Pacific, officially designated UNSEX 361, could produce 10 gallons of ice cream every 7 minutes, operating continuously to supply entire task forces. Japanese forces, facing similar logistics constraints as Germany, couldn't comprehend this allocation of resources. A Japanese officer captured at Okinawa, shown the ice cream facilities aboard an American aircraft carrier, reportedly stated, "We send our pilots on one-way missions because we lack fuel to bring them home. You make ice cream on your ships. This is why we lost." By war's end, the US military had produced approximately 150 million gallons of ice cream for troops overseas. The cost of the ice cream program, including manufacturing equipment, refrigeration, and distribution, exceeded $100 million 1945, more than the entire German food budget for their armed forces in the final year of the war. Post-war interviews with German veterans consistently cited American logistics abundance, symbolized by ice cream, as the moment they understood Germany could not win. Generalfeldmarschall Albert Kesselring, reflecting on the Italian campaign, noted, "We knew the Americans had more tanks, more planes, more ammunition. But when we learned they were manufacturing ice cream at the front, we understood we were not fighting an army, we were fighting an economy. You cannot defeat an economy with an army." The ice cream trucks rolling through liberated Europe and occupied Germany represented something more significant than dessert distribution. They represented the visible manifestation of American industrial capacity, operating at a level that European military powers couldn't comprehend. They proved that the United States could fight a global two-theater war while maintaining domestic prosperity and even delivering luxury items to troops in combat zones. German soldiers were surprised when the US Army showed up with ice cream trucks at the front, because ice cream represented a category of military logistics they had no framework to understand. In German doctrine, soldiers received what was necessary for combat. In American doctrine, soldiers received what was necessary for combat, plus what was desired for morale. The difference between necessary and desired was measured in millions of gallons of ice cream, and that difference represented industrial abundance that Germany couldn't match. Oberst Friedrich von der Heydte, the officer who had initially dismissed ice cream truck reports as reconnaissance error, was captured in December 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. During his interrogation, he was offered ice cream. He accepted, ate it slowly, and then stated to his American interrogators, "I have commanded soldiers for 20 years. I have studied logistics and supply at the highest levels. I thought I understood military operations. Then I ate ice cream provided by your army in December, in Belgium, 500 kilometers from your supply bases, in the middle of the largest battle of the war. This ice cream tells me more about why Germany lost than any intelligence report I ever received. You didn't just outfight us. You outproduced us so thoroughly that you could afford to make ice cream a higher priority than we could make ammunition. That is not a military defeat. That is an industrial annihilation." The ice cream trucks proved a final truth about modern warfare. In industrial conflict, the side with resources so abundant they can afford to exceed necessity will always defeat the side carefully rationing what is necessary. German soldiers were surprised by ice cream trucks because they came from a military culture shaped by scarcity. American soldiers expected ice cream because they came from a culture shaped by abundance, and in the end, abundance proved to be a weapon more devastating than anything that exploded.